Today, I recorded the first episode of my podcast, which will be covering math, physics, philosophy, and a lot of other facets of life, which get you forward and really interest me. Today, I spoke with Kevin Braza, a current teacher at Villanova Preparatory School, who has a degree from UC Santa Barbara in chemistry, a degree from Harvard Online Business School, and is currently enrolled in Loyola Marymount University for a Master's in Arts for Education. One interesting thing I took away from the conversation is that you move forward in life, but you really connect backwards. However hackneyed that may be, it's nice to be reminded that that's really all life seems to be. All right, so on your LinkedIn page, you say, I've led an eclectic life thus far. And I definitely agree with that, given like everything I see on your LinkedIn page. You were a graduate of UC Santa Barbara with a Bachelor of Science in chemistry. You then went on to be a teacher at Villanova Preparatory School,
Yeah.
a mathematics and robotics teacher, and you're like a coach for a number of sports, etc., like lots more. Uh,
Yeah.
what made you decide to like expand your life in so many directions?
I don't know that it was necessarily the sin per se. I just sort of went where I felt like the wind blew that direction in some point. Like I guess there are some people who sort of automatically know what they want in life and
Right.
just say like I'm gonna be a doctor and sort of can gear the entire trajectory of their lives just based off that, right? But I mean, we can see this even in just like 2 years, the world evolves, right? Like, podcasting has become a thing, right? Like AI is very big right now. 2 years ago, there was cryptocurrency, right? Right. Like we had a whole pandemic, right? Which led to me like building my school in Minecraft, right? Like, and if you had asked me in high school, like, do you envision yourself doing any of these things? It's like, yeah, I totally envision graduating in Minecraft and then, bouncing a little bit between a bunch of different careers. And with, I I don't know that it's something like there's a quote that's like life is, like lived forward and understood backwards, right? Like, and I mean, people can connect the dots between like all the different things that I've done and see like, oh yeah, there's a theme now, right? But I think at the heart of living forward, I just saw things that I was interested in, kind of injected myself into them, right? Either because I was curious about them or there was some kind of need that, I was able to step up and be a part of, right? And that expanded my life in more ways than I could have ever thought about, right? So, yeah.
Yes, that's definitely very respectable. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with my life.
Mhm.
Like I'm trying to pursue some physics research, but I
Okay.
definitely know that there are a lot of other
Mhm.
uh, topics in academia which would interest me, like AI,
Mhm.
and possibly chemistry.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
that was my whole study. Like, chemistry was my time, and then I dabbled with a bit of physics, right?
right, yeah.
But
So I saw you did some like physical and inorganic chemistry. I'm actually taking a class in physical chemistry now.
okay, yeah,
How did you like physical chemistry? Like, what was your research in chemistry about?
that was fun. Now you're asking me questions from the distant past. It's uh, just stuff I don't think about now that I'm, like in, at the high school level. But I guess PChem is fun, right? Like the way a chemistry track typically goes, it's a year of general chem, then organic chem, then physical, and then inorganic and biochem and extras, right? Mixed in into the senior year, right? So like I took organic chem. I like the blackboard work, right? Like I really like the idea, the idea, the thought process behind mechanisms, the problem solving, right? Like I'm a math teacher, so like that part really resonated with me. Like I wasn't the biggest fan of like being hunched over in front of a fume hood for 4 hours, 8 hours a day, right?
Mhm.
And it's like where I found myself really intellectually interested in this stuff, but like, do I want this as a job, right? Like, PChem was a lot more my style. One, because it was like just a lot more mathematical in nature, right?
Mhm.
Like, like I really like the intersection between chemistry and physics and math, right? Like, and I think, it was just there was a lot more like of a vantage point where I could get into computationally oriented things, right? So like, rather than like me being in a lab and mixing things myself. I mean, even in PChem, it's a little more exciting because it's like, you play with lasers and set things on fire and electrocute them, like, yeah, the flashy stuff. But, like I learned how to simulate molecules on computer, right? And, rather than take expensive chemical A and, toxic chemical B and, like spend a bunch of money, like, you know, testing back and forth, right? Yeah, that's dangerous and requires people to dress gown up in hazmat gear and all those things, right? You could just sort of kind of use simulation to help you predict like what experiments are going to work or not what are going to work, but what experiments are worth trying to do, right? Like, and save you a bit of time and a bit of, hassle, right? Right, doing things from that front, right? Like from a class perspective, like I really liked it. I think after after OCHEMs, all of the pre-meds kind of like delineate, and then because then you sort of end up with the like core group of like chemists, right? Like, and it tends to be really tailored to like helping you like get the formalism of the field, right? So like my third year taking analytical chem was really just like Gen Chem part three, right?
Mhm.
And then just like being really, really particular about like, like precision and accuracy, like making sure I knew how to do a titration, like, giving me the handiwork skills to actually be a chemist, right? And, I felt like it was a lot less that third year for me, just in total, just felt a lot less of like me taking tests and being evaluated, and a lot more of me is just like actually like learning what my field is about, right? Like in a hands-on sense, right? Not that my classes were a joke. I mean, like I remember the quantum card PChem. I was like, I think that what was it like the average was like a 24, and that was maybe the happiest 37 I've ever had in my life.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Percentage.
percentage wise, right? Like, and I try to teach this to my high school seniors too, because they have to take their AP and IB exams where you're not gonna get 100% on anything. No, no, well, you'll get 100% on something, but like there are tests where like the goal is to give you a spread, right? Like, and
Mhm.
just if it's you're not always going to see something and like 100% know what to do, but like we the goal is to like, can you demonstrate your thought process, right? Like, and show that you've learned something, right, from being here, right? But so, mhm.
Yes,
I,
it's
I,
really it's
mhm,
really cool. I
yeah,
mean, I self-studied a little bit of OChem, but it was much less hands-on, and
mhm,
you know, it was actually through Khan Academy, so that they have like a
mhm,
course for OChem.
yeah,
But that was much more just trying to understand reaction mechanisms and
mhm,
like all of this abstract stuff and like less
mhm.
about um it's not
Actually
it's
doing it,
a
yeah.
lot of creativity and like uh involving yourself in the actual uh
Mhm.
experiments.
Yeah. I, if I can jump in, yeah, I mean, I think it gets really cool when you can do that because, like, I mean, the naming is one thing. Yeah, you mix these two things, you make, 2-butahexanone or something, right? Like whatever that means, right? But like you once you like these have like really real applications, be it materials, be it, like, I guess this one in my mind. Like I remember some of the things I did in my graduate instructional labs. Like we made nylon, we strung it across the room, we dyed different types of fabrics, right? We've made acetaminophen, right? Like we made different types of uh scents, so like wintergreen, right? Like esters, right? We did like a whole I had a whole full-on synthesis project where I tried to replicate well, like analog some kind of intermediate that I found inside a medicinal plant, right? And I worked in pharmaceuticals later. That's kind of what they do, right? Like, see if we can synthetically make the drug versus like, find it out of a plant somewhere and just mass produce that. And yeah,
Right.
so I think it's really cool. It wasn't my I have a big appreciation for the people who do it. Like, and I have like lots of, I had lots of people in my field who like really identified with that as their chemistry, right? But I mean, like, I definitely belong to the blackboard a bit more. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think if I recall correctly, you came from like more of a biochem, you know, you had more of like a biochemical goal. What was it,
Um,
I mean, given like you're saying that you wanted to see more of the blackboard stuff, that would like be more of the physical side of chemistry. But if I
it,
recall correctly, that your major was more on the biological side.
it ebbed and flowed. So like I was pre-dental, right? Like that was sort of the starting trajectory that I wanted. Like I knew I was really good at math and physics. Well, I wouldn't say I was good at it, but like I enjoyed math and physics, right? Like math and
Mm.
physics was at UCSB is like tough. So, but I mean, but I wanted to make sure that I was like doing intro bio, intro chem, and like those recs to like gear me if I wanted to go into a health profession.
Mm.
So I started with that, right? There's a lot more there's a bunch of there's biochem and there's physical chem, but I wouldn't say bio and physics are that separated from each other either, right? There's a lot of physics
Yeah.
that goes into like, modeling proteins, right? Modeling, right? DNA structures, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, like, we had small molecule type simulations that I learned in computational, and then we had like large protein simulations that I had to learn, right? Go to PDB, right? Like generate structures, right? I remember like right when the pandemic happened, like there's actually another person named Kevin Braza at UC San Diego, right? Like, and he was part of the group that like helped elucidate the structure of like the COVID-19 protein. Don't quote me on that one, right? But it's like, but the some of the stuff that's some of the stuff you do, right? Like with like people use the type of physics and modeling for like all sorts of like biological level compounds, right? Right.
Yeah. Do you think that other Kevin Braza would be a good person to like interview or like discuss chemistry with?
I've talked I've met him once. Well, I've talked to him on LinkedIn. We haven't had the chance to meet, but like I mean he's in a he went on to do PhD work. So I think he'd probably be like a big and relevant person, right, to um get hands. I also don't know what like I don't exactly know what your aim is with this podcast. So I guess like that kind of comes from a you perspective, right? But
Yeah.
um, uh, I I kind of come from the vantage point like I'm happy to just like share my story and just like see what other people want to are willing to talk about, hear other people's stories, right? So like I don't know, like I've sort of bounced away from research and then ended up in education, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Right.
my current
Mhm.
project right now. It's been my project for some other at some other points in my life, but no, that's yeah. I guess it depends where your aims are, right? Like there are definitely more people who have a much more like research intensive like things to tell you, right?
Yes, I mean, I'm interested to hear really anything,
Mhm.
but from the
Yeah,
technical side, it
okay,
sounds like he would be a good person to talk with. Although there are a lot of people out there, so
definitely. Yeah.
just have
Mhm.
to find
Yeah. Hmm.
those people in my area.
Hmm.
Um, all right, so you're currently doing a master's at Loyola Marymount
Yeah.
University,
Hmm.
uh, in education. Uh,
Yeah.
so what made you decide to get a master's, and like how is that going?
I'm currently teaching at a high school. So, I mean, like, it's, right now, like, while I'm teaching, I figured I'd, learn a bit about like the current best practice of teaching, which is surprisingly a lot different from how I remember it 6 years ago when I was in high school. Right. And I mean, I think that that might be a good thing. And it shows that like we're not just like gonna do the exact same thing in classrooms like every single year. We're learning and we're evolving, right? And trying out different things, but it's also new to me, right? Like, and I mean, I did teaching assistant stuff in college, right? Like it's not like a new, like the feel of being a classroom is not new to me, but like it's also like there each year and each generation is different. Like, I mean, like I remember like social media being out is like I these kids deal with different struggles in high school than I would have had, right? Like, and where it's like I can, be there and be supportive, but I also don't necessarily know what it means to go through some of the things these kids do, right? And I mean, ChatGPT and AI, right? Like the same idea, right? Like it's going to be a brand new world there. So, um, it never really the dust never really settles on it. Like, I mean, yes, I can know the content and be in a place where I feel like I've learned it, but like the way that that content like passes on to new generations is always going to be right, like, you know, something different, right? So, I mean, I'm taking that on, right? Like, I think the master's program I'm in is like really thorough, right? Like, and like, coaching me through like what are the current best practices, like what are the current paradigms of education that we're, thinking about, like, how do we think about a classroom, especially, a modern classroom in 2023, right? That's coming out of students who are used to being online in the pandemic, right? Like, learning, right? Like,
Yeah,
so I, yeah, so I think I'm getting a lot out of that, right? Yeah.
it's great. So like, have there been any challenges in terms of like engaging students,
Mhm.
perhaps f finding ways to present material that interest other people, like the students, and also maybe like makes it comprehensible. Like I don't know how to phrase that, but like have there been
Mhm.
uh have there been challenges in terms of like just getting everyone involved?
Mhm. High school is a different beast entirely because it's like I'm coming out of like TAing for not for college where it's like on some level the people are there because they kind of elected to be there. Like I chose this as my major, right? Like, and I want to study it. Like there's still
Mm.
some variance, right? Like, and but I mean, like at the high school level, you deal with, you know, good kids who want to learn, right? Like, and who recognize that sometimes like there are some things that might just be hoops to them, right? And that might not necessarily be a bad thing, right? Like, right, like I mean, like I deal with a lot of kids who are incredibly bright and want to go into right fields that are not particularly mathematical in nature. They want to go into law, they wanted to go into right like
Mm.
journalism, right? Like, and I mean, like I'm fully supportive of that. Like, I mean, my goal in my class is to make sure that you learn something, right? Like, and not that like I I don't want to. It's like and people like are on varying levels of this chain, right? Like there's right, like I want people like everyone to be high scoring and like has this particular understanding of math, right? Versus right, like I want you to like understand this at a fundamental level where you have a certain level of confidence, right? And if you want to be autodidact and rise to the higher level, right? Like I'll get out of your way and you can do that, right? So, I mean, that balance is like tricky because it's like I know my own urges to really be at that like top of the pyramid, right? Like like how do we encourage critical thinking in our
Mhm.
students, right? And like really get them to that high point, but also like what's the really fundamental stuff that like if nothing else I want them to know, right? Because like that's ultimately what's gonna make them feel like confident enough to start tackling those higher order problems, right? Right.
Yeah.
If they
Okay.
choose to do that, right? So
Yes.
it's a delicate balancing act, right, for me. And I mean, like, had I, treated college with that same level of scrutiny, I'm sure that would have been a thing too. Like, I think what is the current DFW rate for Gen Chem across the country? I think it's like 57, right?
Hmm. Wait,
So I mean, like, yeah.
what does DFW mean?
Oh, drop, fail, withdraw, right? So
Got it.
like, and there are variations for that. Like people go into pre-med, they decide it's not for them, right? Like, but I mean, like right now, like at a high school level, like where I know my goal is to graduate these kids, right? Like, and make sure that they learn something from being with me, right? Like, what is the fundamental stuff that I want them to know, right? Like for the time that they have with me. Yeah.